Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Alliance Bernstein. Since 2019, employees have impacted our community by giving more than 5,000 hours of volunteerism in Middle Tennessee. AllianceBernstein.com. Alliance Bernstein is not affiliated with National Public Radio.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. For anyone who pays close attention to local politics, the name Heidi Campbell is one you've heard many times. She currently serves as the state senator for District 20. Before that, she was mayor of Oak Hill. In 2022, she made a run for Congress, and last year she ran to be the mayor of Nashville. Even though she didn't win either race, she claims she holds no regrets about throwing her name in the ring. But what made her get into the political arena in the first place? How did her early life, growing up in Nashville, help to shape her understanding of the world around her? And what was it like to hold public office in a time of division and, in some cases, derision? I'm happy to welcome Senator Heidi Campbell back to This Is Nashville. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Really appreciate it. Okay, so how are you today?
I'm doing great.
Wonderful.
Really glad to be here.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've been asking guests this. What is the big thing, the big idea on your mind these days? Like, get philosophical with me.
Yeah, well, it's easy for me to do that because I'm feeling pretty philosophical coming out of this last session. And the big thing on my mind is that I sit up in my office a lot of times and look out the window in the middle of session and think, you know what? Most people in this city, most people in this state have no earthly idea what is going on up here. We hear about it in the circles that we're in and the bubbles that we're in, but most people don't really know what's going on in our state government or even in our national government in a lot of ways. So I think a lot about how we can get the word out, get outside of our bubbles and let people know what's happening.
Do you think that's in part to, local media coverage has been going down over the years? National media coverage only highlights specific things, particularly when it comes to politics. Do you think it's that or kind of apathy by the general public and the general voter, or a combination of both?
Yeah, they're not mutually exclusive. As a matter of fact, that's a circle you're talking about right there. That's a cycle. And moreover, there's a profit motive there. I think there is a definite motive in keeping the electorate divided, keeping the electorate uninformed, and in some cases disinformed. And so, it's interesting. Down at the legislature, we have two incredibly disparate and different realities. And you see it most profoundly when you see things like vaccines and vegetables or, chemtrails or some of these crazy things. But the truth of the matter is that we are literally living in different realities because of the media that we're imbibing, because of the circles that we're in.
It's a far cry from how things used to be.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, very much so.
Okay, speaking of how things used to be, I want to get to at the beginning. Talk about your childhood and growing up in Nashville. How do you recall your childhood? What was it like?
I have the best memories of growing up in Nashville. I grew up in Green Hills, and, I would leave my house in the morning on weekends or in the summer and not come home till after dark, and we never worried about it. And we had a very autonomous existence. We were, my generation were called latchkey kids.
I'm one.
Yeah. Our parents were off doing stuff and we were kind of on our own, and it was safe. So that's a great thing, and Green Hills was not the Tony place that it is now. It was more middle class. I remember when the Bluebird Cafe opened, and it was just literally a cafe.
Okay.
And, so I have really good memories. And Nashville was a small town then, and the soul of Nashville, that feeling that you get of people really caring about each other, that you still feel, that was pervasive. Now, on the other side of the coin, as I've grown up, I've realized that there were Nashvilles that I didn't know at all, because Nashville is incredibly redlined. And so my existence in the city was in a certain section of it. And it's been a real eye-opening experience as I've gotten older to see, kind of some of the stuff that was going on that I didn't realize that was going on when I was a child.
Let's talk about your family. Tell me about your parents. What were they like?
My parents are really cool people. They're very smart. Everybody in my family is a doctor. My mom's a nurse, but my brother, my sister, my dad, my aunts, uncles, they're all doctors. And the reason that we're in Tennessee is my dad came here to start a cardiology practice, really the first cardiology practice in this area. And so I always joke with my dad that I grew up in the sacrament of Western medicine because, it's just like, sitting at a dinner table in my household, you never know what we get into, but it usually had to do with science or medicine or something like that. So it was really great because I think the scientific method and really testing things and looking for data, backing things up with facts was kind of ingrained in me from a young age. If my parents thought that there was some problem with the kids, we would see some article from the New England Journal of Medicine on the refrigerator.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and it would be sort of just sitting there like, just in case you wanted to look at this.
Okay.
Might.
The little subtle clues from scientist parents.
Well, and also, probably, we wouldn't really understand it, but I don't think I think they thought we should try and figure that out.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. Were your folks strict or were they pretty relaxed?
They were pretty relaxed, but strict about some things. And, one thing, the Hippocratic Oath reigns supreme in my world, which is do no harm. And maybe I've modified that to tell my kids. And I really do live by this motto is try every day to make the world a better place. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I do think that generally people who go into medicine, people who go into service, that it should be the goal.
Yeah. So you have siblings.
I do, yeah. My brother's 10 years older, and it was really good training for me growing up to be in politics because he was an alpha male, and he would fight with me even though he's 10 years older. And my mom would say, you need to learn to get along with your brother. And sometimes when I'm in the legislature working with my colleagues across the aisle, that voice is in my head like, you need to figure out how to get along with these people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have a sister as well?
Yes, and I'm very close to her. She's a seventh grade science teacher.
Okay. Are you the middle child?
No, I'm the youngest.
The youngest?
Yeah.
What's that like?
Well, I have all those youngest child attributes, which is, I've got a lot of gumption and definitely caused my parents a lot of trouble, but, also felt a lot of times like I had to prove myself. So I think that's, led me to strive to do things. I was in a rock band and we toured the East Coast and Europe and opened for Hootie and the Blowfish and Dave Matthews Band. It was an awesome band. It was really fun. And so that kind of striving to do something that some people might see as unattainable, I think that's a very youngest child kind of thing to do.
I do want to ask about your rock band, your rock star career in a few minutes. But, you mentioned that growing up in Nashville was a very red-line city. Mm-hmm. When you reflect on those times, what do you think about the restricted access to the city that many Nashvillians had to live with during those times?
It's heartbreaking to me, and it's still happening. Our city is still incredibly redlined. When I was young, I guess it wasn't too long before my childhood that there were swimming pools that, Black people weren't allowed to swim in. Mm-hmm. And we saw the highways come through this city, the three big highways, the confluence of which is downtown, dividing up neighborhoods. And still there are neighborhoods because of the way that happened where we have healthcare deserts, we have food deserts. And it's really tragic to me that we don't seem to have come very far. And I feel like Nashville's kind of the tip of the spear for that conversation because I think there was, and I'd be curious if you agree with this, that there was this era with Obama where we kind of thought we were post-racial, where we were moving on. And it became really apparent right afterwards that not only was that not the case, but the hammer came down and it was just as bad as it had ever been.
I feel like we thought we were post-racial because President Obama won. And I think it was a good thing for a lot of people to see. I was never convinced. And I also wasn't very surprised to see the reaction happen.
Yes, and I just hope that we're seeing the infection continuing to be fought, because I feel like we're at this inflection point right now where it could go either way. And, and that, to your very first question that you asked me, is sort of where am I philosophically right now? I'm very concerned. I feel like we're facing these existential crises, not only with our environment, but also with democracy itself. We've been downgraded to an anocracy. Tennessee is the tip of the spear for that. We are not living in anything close to a democracy. And I see that firsthand every single day, with the way our money is being appropriated, with the way decisions are being made, and certainly with this current administration, the way that the direction in which our state is headed.
I do want to get into your experience being a state legislator in a little bit. I want to ask a little bit about life as a teenager in Nashville.
Yeah.
How was high school for you?
So I had a really tough time in high school, and for a long time that was something that I felt bad about. And then I realized that it was part of the arc of my journey that really led me to be able to have the insight that I have. I had a troubled period of time when I was playing music and with a rock band and hanging out with people in their 20s. I was 13 and thinking that I just wasn't even going to complete school because I wanted to go do music. And also, it was emotionally a tough time for me. I had a hard time as an adolescent emotionally. And my parents really didn't think that I could stay in Nashville. And so I had an incredible opportunity to go to an outward bound boarding school where, it was a get your S together kind of place, and we grew our own food, and we had to do work service projects, but it was also an incredible community. And I really did have a paradigm shift at Colorado Rocky Mountain School is the name of the place. And quite frankly, I think it saved my life.
Wow. So you go all the way out to Colorado to go to school, and it's an outward bound school, so you definitely didn't get the facts of life experience in school, for those who know the television show. What were some of the things that they had you all do there?
Well, we do work service projects, we farm, we, cooked our own food and cleaned up in the kitchen and did hope art, which was, you had to do the dishes, and you had different things that you had to do, cleaning the dorms or whatever. It was just a, step up and take care of yourself kind of environment. Mm-hmm. And initially it seemed like a punishment. And inevitably, it seemed like the best opportunity in the world to have a deeper understanding of what we need to expect of each other and of ourselves.
I'm curious about that. Like, what was going through your mind as you first arrived? You're 13, 14 years old, wanting to be a rock star. Your parents is like, no, we're getting you out of the city entirely. Yeah, I'm sure you were pretty frustrated and angry with them.
Yeah, well, you go on this outward bound experience first, and if you don't do the experience, then you can't go to the school. So you go through 10 days of hiking through the wilderness, and you have a 2-day solo where you have to find your way back to the group with just a compass and a map. That's back when we had paper maps. Yeah. We didn't have phones, right? And then you do this work service where we were building switchbacks on trails, and that's hard work. You're digging switchbacks. It's tough, and you're hiking long distances a day with heavy backpacks, and it really, really requires you to step up. And I had this moment where I decided I didn't want to stay there anymore because I hated it and it was awful, and I wanted to go back home and be in a rock band. And and I said to my guide on the trip, Eugene Deschênes, I remember him. He was this like cranky old dude who smoked hand-rolled cigarettes, which is just like
that's old school.
At the time, old school. But he was a philosopher, and he was a tough guy. And he said, "Okay, so you want to go back, and let's just ask the group how they feel about that." And all the group said, "Wow, I think that's really lame. I can't believe she's leaving." And I always cared what my friends or what my peers or my, peer group thought of me. And that was the paradigm shift for me. I said, no, wait a second. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to stay here and do it. And it was just, who knows where I'll have a moment like that. That was mine. And I decided that I wasn't going to go back. And that was the beginning of a big sea change for me.
So you would say that your life would have been different had you not had attended that boarding school, huh?
I think right. I think I was, and how fortunate I am that my parents gave me that opportunity and, well, forced me to go out there because I think I would be a very different person, and I'm glad. It definitely expanded my worldview.
I wonder how that affected your relationship with your folks. Were you angry with them, resentful, maybe initially, but how did your relationship with your parents change over the years from your arrival to graduating from there?
Yeah, I think initially I was probably angry, and it's hard for me to even access who I was then. But all I am now is incredibly grateful. Yeah, I probably was. I'm sure I was a massive pain in the butt. I know that I was. Yeah.
All right. So graduation comes. Where did you go to college?
Sarah Lawrence. So that's in the Northeast. It's a little bit outside of New York City. It's very arty. I always joke that it's a great school. It's a great school for literature. Maya Angelou taught there, and Joseph Campbell, who did The Power of Myth, and a lot of really great poets. And it's really a writing-focused school, which was good for me. I'm a writer. I always joke, too, that it's kind of like a black turtleneck eating disorder school, too, because, it's very arty.
Yes.
And so it was a very good experience for me, and it was really cool to be right near New York City, be able to go in and see shows and stuff like that, and play. I played, Kenny's Castaways and CBGBs and clubs like that while I was in school.
All right, let's take a break. So after the break, we'll learn a little bit more about what college was like for you. When we return, we'll continue our conversation with State Senator Heidi Campbell to learn more about her life as a college student, as a young adult making her way in the world. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. My guest today is Heidi Campbell, state senator for District 20. That's Nashville for the uninitiated. Now, before the break, we learned about what her life was like growing up in the Green Hills neighborhood of Music City. She transferred to a boarding school after some difficulty in high school. It was there where she got her first taste of service, a taste that would grow over the years. Now let's learn what college was like and about her life as a young adult. Senator Heidi Campbell, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so you enrolled at Sarah Lawrence College, Yonkers, New York. What was it like being so close and being close to the Big Apple after having spent so many years kind of growing up in the small town that Nashville was at the time?
It was cool. It was, it wasn't as different as it might have been if I hadn't gone somewhere else for school. And even though my boarding school was in a small town, I had traveled a lot as a child. We had gone to Haiti to do work service projects when I was a kid. And when I was 13, I went to work for Save the Children in in Tunisia, Africa. Mm-hmm. And so I had some worldly experience. What it was really massively cool to be right outside of New York City, to be able to go in. I was, able to play music on the weekends, and also just to have access to such a rich cultural environment.
As some people go to college simply to study, they don't take much time to explore and have fun.
Yeah.
How did you do college?
Well, I did both. I mean, Sarah Lawrence was a very Montessori-ish college, I guess I would say, and as much as it was not graded, you got, reviews instead of grades, and you didn't have tests. Instead, you wrote papers, which, by the way, put me in a horrible position when I went to Vanderbilt and got my MBA, because I was like, why are you guys testing us?
Okay.
There's some drawbacks to that as well. But what it is really good for is creative thinking, and thinking outside of the box and exploring different aspects of things and not being stuck with a formulaic approach to things.
I'm curious about your plan post-graduation. You were still playing music, so was being a rock star still the plan even after the education in Sarah Lawrence?
Yes, even more so because I played a lot of music in college and we had, groups that we had in college. So when I got back to Nashville after I graduated, I started a band and that's so cliche because you grew up in Nashville, you start a band, but it wasn't country. It was alternative at the time was what it was called.
Alternative. What was the name of the band?
It was called The Keep.
The Keep.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You guys were definitely, were you like grunge alternative?
No, actually, it was more Fleetwood Mac-y, kind of, harmony-oriented stuff.
Okay.
We called it range rock at the time. Yeah.
I like that.
It was a name we made up, but, big music. And we had a blast. That was a really cool time to be playing in Nashville. The clubs here in the early to mid-'90s were so cool. There was 12th and Porter, 328 Performance Halls. Downtown was just tumbleweeds and just a couple of clubs here and there. It was really, you wouldn't even recognize downtown if you went back in time and saw that. It's changed so much. But it was cool. It was really an organic group of people coming up. It was Keith Urban was playing around at the clubs at the time we were, and just some really great, frankly, non-country music mostly. And there was the Nashville curse that nobody could get signed unless they were country here. And people really had a hard time for many years getting anything that wasn't country out of this city. It wasn't really until Jack White came here that anybody saw anything non-country as viable from Nashville.
Wow. So were like really good bands who weren't doing country music, were they forced to leave Nashville and go to places like New York and LA to get attention and get signed?
Pretty much. And you couldn't make any money at all playing in Nashville if you weren't country. And frankly, if you were country, because even if you were country, you went on tour. But it was really like most of the people I hung out with were session players, the Nashville Cats. They were making money playing with other people. And inevitably, that's what happened to my band is the Dixie Chicks and Patty Griffin came in and swooped them up because they're amazing musicians. And, I couldn't pay them. So, of course, they went and played with them. And I started licensing my music to film and television. And that is a lot more lucrative than trying to get gigs in Nashville.
I can imagine it is. How did you make that adjustment from songwriting and performing to working in music licensing and syncing?
Anybody who's in music will tell you that there's no guide. There's no guidebook. You're just trying to figure it out. I mean, I think it's similar when you're trying to get into acting out in LA. I mean, you just sort of have to go wherever you can find the love, or the money. And in this instance, the fact that I was able to get songs on TV shows was something that I felt like I needed to pursue. And so I started doing that for other people. I had a bunch of friends that had written amazing music that wasn't getting any play, and I knew they could make money off of it. So I'd fly out to LA, meet with music supers, and license their music to film and TV, and started a little business doing that as a subcontractor for Vanguard Records and for Warner Brothers Alternative Division. And then I realized I was really in over my head business. Remember, I went to Sarah Lawrence.
Yes.
So I went to Vanderbilt and got my MBA. Fell in love with my husband during that time, and went up with him. He was finishing getting his JD MBA in Minnesota and had my 2 kids. And I was really lonely up there, and so I ran for district council in St. Paul and won the election. And so I served on the St. Paul District Council while they were doing the light rail to the airport, and that was absolutely intriguing. I learned so much from that. It's really cool to go back now and see what's happened to that corridor now that the light rail has been put in.
Okay, I'm going to get into all this in a second. We're going to get through all this, but I have a couple questions.
Okay.
Give me one television show that one of your songs was placed in back then.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Nice. Well done. Well done. Okay, so I'll get back. You met your husband at Vanderbilt when you were in graduate school. Was he in school in Vandy at the same time?
Yeah, actually, I went up to a wedding, and the guy I was dating was friends with him. And no, he was in Minnesota, and I met him at a wedding in Minnesota.
You met him at a wedding in Minnesota when you were on a date with someone else.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I got to ask this. What made your husband stand out to you more so than the guy you were with?
So the guy I was with, unbeknownst to me, was dating a power model who was absolutely drop dead gorgeous at the time. And she was walking around flipping her hair. And I just thought, you know what, man, I don't want to deal with that. And Andrew, my husband, was a super nice guy. We just started talking and hanging out. And he's my best friend. So I kind of he started to become my best friend at that moment. So.
What made you realize that he was the one?
I don't know. You just know, I mean, it's the comfort, the rapport, I just kind of felt like I'd known him for forever when we first started hanging out, and have been hanging out with some pretty not so great people in the music business. And I listened to my inner voice that said, hey, don't marry a drummer.
That's good advice.
Yeah.
Good advice.
Sorry to all the drummers.
Yeah. No hate on drummers. This was back in the day.
Yes.
How did he propose to you?
On a bended knee with a ring, and having also asked my father prior to it. Very old school. Yes.
Old school tradition. How'd you feel about that old school tradition? Because I know there's many people, particularly ladies these days, who are like, that is traditional. I don't want nothing to do with it. And other people see it as a form of respect. How do you view it?
It's interesting because the me back then was very caught up into the narrative arc that we have in our movies, and so I was very on board with that. But in retrospect, probably I think it's kind of a little patriarchal, and I certainly wouldn't expect it from my daughter. Although my husband, I don't know, I haven't talked to him about it. He might.
We'll see. If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Ekulona. We're talking this hour with State Senator Heidi Campbell about her life and why she decided to come to public office. So, newlyweds, you moved to St. Paul, Minnesota. Far cry from Nashville. What'd you think when you got there?
So St. Paul is such a cool city. It's very flat, and I miss the hills. But it's such a cool. You know what? Mainly, I really geeked out on the infrastructure, because they have phenomenal bike paths, and they have the city is just better designed. And I had a lot of time on my hands because I didn't know anybody, and I kind of started paying attention to the way that city is built. And it occurred to me, I started really thinking about how Nashville really has not been built as with as much foresight, and how we don't have the infrastructure, the bike paths. In downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul, yes, of course, it was because it's so cold there in the winters, but they have these phenomenal tunnel networks between the buildings. Have you ever been?
Yeah, I've seen
and it's pretty cool because there's a city within a city.
Yeah, you can get around.
So there's been a lot of forethought and urban planning that's gone into that city that you don't feel here.
You said you were lonely.
Yes.
And you decided to run for office because you were lonely. That's not, some people will join a gym or the tennis club or something, or start playing, gardening and meeting folks, a dance class, not run for public office.
Well, I'll tell you a little secret. It got to the point where I was actually eating a hero. I was pregnant, and I was eating a hero in a car by myself, and I started singing, "Did you ever know that you're my hero?" to my sandwich.
Okay, well
I
done.
thought, you know what, man, I need to get something else going on here. And so, it was just something that came up. I was, sort of looking at what was going on around me, and I thought, you know what, why not? I think I'll run for this. And I'm really glad I did, because I learned so much. I ended up serving on a board for a theater there, and one year I was awarded Citizen of the Year in St. Paul because I had started a program called Clean for the Green, which was about litter remediation, and setting up a program where businesses and nonprofits work together instead of adopt a highway here, which is such a great idea at the very beginning. Everybody gets really enthusiastic about adopt a highway, and they're for the first few months, just like you're dieting at New Year's. I mean, it is gangbusters, and then it peters out and people don't clean it up. This was a contract that kept people on board on both sides, because it was a contract between nonprofits and corporations where the corporation will provide X amount for the nonprofit for the year, and the nonprofit will agree to keep X space cleaned up. And then they both have the guarantee of the do-gooderism that the corporation gets and also having the environment cleaned up. And of course, nonprofits are constantly looking for reliable sources of income. So that Clean for the Green program was really effective and really made a big difference, and it's actually something I'm trying to get going here.
I think we could definitely use it. So what spurred the move back to Nashville? Everything seems to be going well in Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Well, we Southern girls, we drag our husbands back down here so we can be with our families.
Okay.
My mom and dad are here. I'm very close to them. My sister is here, and also my husband got offered a job here. So it all seemed to make sense.
What did you do when you get back? Did you jump into politics immediately, or
No.
back into the music business?
No, I have never considered. As a matter of fact, when I was in St. Paul, I guess I didn't really even consider that politics. No, I thought I was going to get back into music, but I was really into being a mom. And so I started at the school board for my kids' school, which was Children First Montessori. They didn't have a school board, so and they needed a way to raise money and build some support around the school. So I started a school board, and I for them, parent-teacher, 501c3 parent-teacher organization, and I was the first chair of that. And then we were moving to Oak Hill, and I found where my parents live, and I found out that they were going to be building this huge shopping mall on the corner of Franklin Pike and Old Hickory Boulevard, and they were going to blast into one of the hills on the Highland Rim, the beautiful Highland Rim that surrounds Nashville. And those, when you fly over Nashville, you see trees. You don't even see city for so much of it because of those gorgeous hills. And they were going to blast one of them and, cut into it. And I thought, we got to stop that. So I started a little group called Save Oak Hill, and we have bunnies on the signs, and we got a petition, and we stopped it. And then everybody looked around and said, wow, somebody's got to run for office to keep this from happening in the future. And I was the sucker that raised my hand. And so I ran for commission, and then the commission elects the mayor and the vice mayor. So I was the vice mayor for 2 years, and then the mayor for 4 years. And that's just to give you some time frame, was when Megan Berry was elected. And she was amazing and put me on the solid waste board. And so serving on that board and being involved with a lot of other municipal processes, I started to get an awareness of what was going on in the state and kind of some of the problems that we had in the state. And that was sort of when I started looking at maybe running for something else.
Why was it important for you to come back to your hometown? And then you experienced so many different things in other cities and other places. You had seen things in other parts of the world in your early life. Why was it important for you to come back and to get involved?
This is my home. It's in the water. It's in the earth. It's in this city. I am from here, and I feel very much a part of this city. It's my home, and I care deeply about what happens to Nashville. It's a really magical place, truly a magical place, and I think some of that magic is under fire. And we certainly have seen that over the past few years. So and certainly when I moved back here, it was more about having my kids be growing up where I grew up, and also my family. I'm very close to my family, and I wanted to be near them.
Let's take one more break. When we come back, we'll continue our talk with Heidi Campbell and discover what it's like to hold public office in a time of deep political division. You can join the conversation by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekulona, and this is Nashville. My guest is Heidi Campbell, state senator for District 20, a position she's held since 2020. She's one of a small number of Democrats in the state Senate, a body that has seen its fair share of unflattering news over the years. Before she ran for office, she had a promising career in the music industry. So why did she decide to subject herself and her family to the scrutiny that comes with holding public office? Well, Heidi Campbell is here to now talk about that decision. Senator Campbell, again, really appreciate you being here.
So glad to be here.
Okay, so you got this great career in music. You come back, you decide to get involved in Oak Hill to preserve part of this natural landscape that we have here in Nashville. You became mayor. What was it like to be the mayor of Oak Hill? Was it a lot of pressure?
It was the best possible training that you could have for being in the state legislature because it was so much harder in so many ways. It was like a Williamson County School Board meeting every day. Lots of entitlement issues. I mean, it's a small little city, and I think that a lot of people would say that the smaller the political body, the more drama there is, and that was certainly the case. And it really put me through the ringer and through a lot of tests. I mean, a lot of the people who were really focused on the political situation in Oak Hill were incredibly far-right people, the same kinds of people that I happened to be with in the legislature, but even more divided because it was literally their neighborhood. It was literally their backyard that they were concerned about, and the issues were very important because I think that organic process of starting from your backyard and moving up to your city and then your state and that kind of thing has value because I think you learn along the way about the things that the building blocks of those things, the zoning, the legislation that you do on a city level, the municipal things. And I do think that's been incredibly helpful in the state because it really helps me understand what's going on the grassroots level.
You alluded to it a little bit that you felt like some of the division came because it was people's backyards, something that they care intimately and deeply about. From your experience, having people who are really dogmatic in their views and their principles, particularly their politics, how do you find that middle ground that's necessary to actually govern?
It's really about listening. And by the way, there were a lot of things I wasn't able to get done. I mean, for example, I got a grant for a multimodal path down Franklin Pike, and I thought that's going to be amazing because it's going to be offset from the road. It's going to connect Nashville to Brentwood. It's going to, and then it was even going to go up to Radnor Lake. It's going to, be safe biking, safe walking for people. Oh my God, you would have thought that I was murdering puppies. People were furious. I mean, they showed up so angry about the prospect of doing this and said it was unsafe and people would die. And I could not understand why people were so opposed to it. And by the way, I learned a big lesson. I should have definitely worked with people before I just jumped into trying to get this plan off the ground and gotten their input. And so it was a learning experience for me. And I also learned that, quite frankly, they didn't want the wrong sorts of people, in quotation marks, coming through the neighborhood. And that was really a bummer to find out that is still going on in this day and age when data clearly shows us that it makes neighborhoods safer when you put that kind of infrastructure in and healthier. I mean, we've got one of the worst obesity rates in the country, in the state. There are all kinds of benefits to that kind of infrastructure. And by the way, we have some of the worst pedestrian deaths from traffic in this city. So it was unfortunate and also a learning experience about how the order of operations and how it's very important that you center the people that live in the spaces where you're trying to do that work.
You said something that they didn't want, quote unquote, the wrong kinds of people walking through the neighborhood. How did that hit you? I mean, that's obviously an effect of, let's say, a redlining mentality. How did that impact you when you heard that? You were trying to do something for everyone. You had seen the town you grew up in, seen it change a lot since you left and came back, yet people still are holding on to the redlining idea of what Nashville is.
I find it so painful. I mean, it expands so much in the legislature when we see the anti-trans things. We see the slate of hate legislation. We see the racism, the sexism, the anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant. There's so much anti-immigrant rhetoric right now. As a matter of fact, I would say that's the new other. That's what's driving the conversation right now between the two parties. Is this fear that's being gigged up, and it caused me to go back and look at the history of Oak Hill and the city, and I realized that Oak Hill was formed for the purposes of segregation. That's the reason that city was built. And in a lot of ways, this country, that's one of the most painful things about this country, is that it has been built on the abuse of people, and not just the marginalization, but the actual exploitation and abuse of people. From Native Americans through slavery, through now some of the immigrant relationships, and that's pervasive. And you see that when you try to move a project along.
You mentioned something about the immigration being a divisive issue within the state body right now. Do you think that's because this is an election year? Whenever the election year rolls around, there's certain motifs, let's say, that come up in campaigns. Immigration, crime, abortion. Those are some of the top three in the economy. No matter what shape any of those issues happen to be in, they're always painted as being in horrific shape by the party that really wants to take control. Do you think that's why we're seeing some of this immigration vitriol being spread around so much?
I think that's true, except for that I would add to that we're always in an election cycle now. And so for the past 50 years, this has been the Council for National Policy strategy to divide us on a handful of ideological issues because, quite frankly, democracy is not convenient. It's a pain in the butt for people who want to just make money. And so we are really living that experiment right now. And immigration is a really good fear, motivator for a lot of people. Yes, it is definitely a campaign issue, but don't you think that we're at a point now when we're constantly campaigning?
Yeah. It seems to be that way. Until we can get the big money out of elections, we're constantly going to be in a campaign thing. So talking about campaigns, what made you jump from Oak Hill to the state level?
I saw that there were a lot of problems with the state, especially in terms of how Nashville and the state were working together. And I knew that there was a seat that was possibly flippable. And so I decided to go for it because I wanted, this is it's a gateway drug to get involved with this. I mean, you start caring and then there's never an end, right? To things that you realize and think, oh my God, somebody has to do something about that. And so I got caught in that, pattern of, seeing, all of the things that were going on and really caring. And wanting to do something about it. And so I decided to try to flip this seat because, I think most people in Nashville, I know because we polled it, most people in Nashville think that the controlling party in the state is not looking after the people in Tennessee. And I know that my colleagues, and I work with some amazing people in the Davidson County delegation and in the Democratic caucus who if people knew how hard those people are fighting for them, they would really appreciate what they're doing because it's a lot of work. And I wanted to be a part of making a difference. And so I decided to run for that seat, and we flipped it.
You flipped it.
We did it.
What were the first days of being a state legislator like? Like, what misconceptions did you have before you took that oath of office? And how did that change once you got to work?
It was actually during COVID. And so it was super quiet because the building was closed. And So really, my misconceptions didn't become apparent to me until the next year when the halls started filling up. Because I had this period of time when I was really kind of learning the ropes without a lot of people around. So and that's, hey, I was pretty lucky, actually. I'm just now realizing in retrospect to have been able to have that training experience sans people. And then, the next year, those halls fill up and you are going every single minute. There's somebody in your office you're meeting with. And so I think that was really more the process, was realizing after a year that, oh my goodness, this is going to be a totally different gig now that, people are here.
Big time different gig. So how did your fellow legislators receive you, the Democrats and Republicans?
Well, the Democrats are, my friends, and they're great, and I love my colleagues. And the Republicans, it took them a minute because they absolutely justifiably were upset that I had flipped the seat and their colleague was gone. Great guy, a guy named Steve Dickerson, and they were very sorry that he had been beaten in that election. So it took me some time to win their friendship, and they are my friends. I love them. I mean, I care deeply about their families. I disagree with them on a handful of issues, and quite frankly, agree with them on most issues. I will say, I think the Senate is very different from the House. I think maybe there's not that collegiality in the House, is my perception. But I genuinely care about my colleagues in the Senate.
How important is that for our public officials, no matter what office they're serving, to say things like that? Like, you appreciate and you're friends with your colleagues in the Senate, Democrat and Republican, because if we look at what people's perceptions are, if we look at how the media sometimes covers stories, you think that you all are mortal enemies, Hatfields and McCoys out there. But that's not the case, is it?
No, not at all. I mean, I have never had a harsh word with one of my colleagues. I've had serious conversations about policy issues where we've been very honest and on the other side of things. But look, what you said is so true. And I really do believe, while it is so important that we shed light on what's going on in the state. And like I said, our government does not function for the people. And I truly believe that. I also think that we're not going to get through this without civility, respect, attacking one another, whether you're on one side or the other side, gives us no place to go. It's just not a way to solve problems.
One of the things you're very passionate about is our environment. Why?
Because if we don't have a habitable planet, everything else is irrelevant. And it is so, I get that it's such a huge thing that it's hard for people to even process it. I get that. And also, we cannot ignore it. And as I've gotten older, I've come more and more to admire one of Tennessee's greats, Al Gore, for, so many years ago. How long ago was that?
Long time ago.
Like 20 years?
Yeah,
I don't know.
over.
Longer.
Uh-huh.
Inconvenient truth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and here we are, and we are not doing what we need to do, and especially in the state of Tennessee, not doing what we need to do to be good stewards of our environment. And it's really frustrating to me that even on our side, even on the Democratic, it's just not an issue that people get excited about.
Like, what do you think that is? Do you think that people are kind of selfish and be like, well, when it goes to hell, I'm going to be dead? Or they think it's just simply not going to happen? What do you think it is? Because you've talked to citizens, you've had your own life experience, and you get to talk to legislators and lawmakers about this. People still seem to be lost. They're in a cloud, sorry for the bad weather pun.
No, but it's so true. And I think what you just said is exactly what we're dealing with, that the immediacy, and especially when we have intentional immediacy of issues, like the media is actually trying to drive the immediacy of issues every single day so that the news cycles are just insurmountable, that people can't think about the long term. Getting the public on board with it is really tough because of what you just said, because there's something else that we need to pay attention to. And quite frankly, fairly, people are living their lives. I mean, when you have little kids and you have, a mortgage to pay, and you have, kitchen table issues that you're dealing with, especially in a state like Tennessee that doesn't address those kinds of issues, you don't have time to think about our anthropogenic era and the fact that we are really like ticking down the clock and we're at 11:59 and 59 seconds,
All right, so you're running for office again.
I am.
Why that laugh?
Because it's just, yes, I'm running for office again.
Yeah. Why?
Well, because this seat is the most competitive seat in the state. Because we flipped it, because we need to hang on to it, and because I care deeply about these issues, and I have a lot of work that I'm doing, and I want to keep doing it.
Heidi Campbell is the state senator for District 20. Heidi, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate this.
Thank you. Always love talking to you.
Thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by yours truly, directed by yours truly. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Larange and Namir Blade. You can listen back at thisisnashville.org or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekulona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody. And be good to each other.